In the quiet echo of the American plains, beyond the rolling mountains, past the dusty roads that disappear into the horizon, lies a chapter of history that shaped an entire nation. A place where courage met chaos, where dreams met danger, where legends were not born from stories, but from survival. This is the untold history of the American Wild West. A world filled with cowboys and outlaws, wagon trains and dusty trails, lawmen who stood alone, and pioneers who crossed endless miles, chasing something no map could ever promise. In this story, we travel back to the late 1700s and the explosive 1800s, when America was not yet a complete country, just a vast land of opportunity, mystery, and conflict. So sit back, relax your breathing, and let your mind wander into the wide-open frontier, where silence was broken only by the wind, and where history was written one dusty footprint at a time. Welcome to the Wild West. Long before wagon wheels carved trails into the soil, long before gunsmoke hung in the air, the West was home to civilizations older than the United States itself. The Apache, the Navajo, the Lakota, the Cherokee, the Cheyenne, the Blackfoot, tribes who lived with rhythm, with nature, with sky and soil. For thousands of years, these lands were not wild, they were home. Mountains whispered stories, rivers shaped beliefs, and buffalo moved like a living sea across the plains. But everything changed when explorers, Spanish, French, and British, arrived in search of gold, territory, and power. At first, the West became a place of curiosity, then of conflict, then of unstoppable expansion. As European settlers moved westward, their tools, horses, weapons, and diseases altered everything. Old worlds collided with new ambitions, and a slow storm began to form, a storm that would shape the next century. The Wild West wasn't created in a moment. It was formed by pressure, migration, fear, and the unstoppable force of a young nation hungry to grow. The year was 1803. In a single signature, President Thomas Jefferson bought 828,000 square miles of land from France. A piece of land so massive that it doubled the size of the United States overnight. This historic deal, known as the Louisiana Purchase, included present-day Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas, and parts of New Mexico, Texas, and Minnesota. Back then, it was seen as a gamble. Today, it's seen as one of the greatest land deals in world history. For settlers, this meant one thing: the West was open. For native tribes, it meant something else. Their world would never be the same. And for America, it meant a destiny was set in motion. A destiny people would later call manifest destiny. The belief that Americans were meant to occupy the entire continent. And so, wagon wheels began turning, slowly at first, then in endless lines stretching toward the horizon. Families packed blankets, rifles, flour, salt, coffee, tin plates, and hope. They moved west, not because they were sure, but because they believed.
Imagine a road so long that it took 5 to 6 months to walk. Imagine a journey so dangerous that 1 in every 10 people never reached the end. This was the Oregon Trail, a 2,170-mile path stretching from Missouri to Oregon. Families traveled by covered wagon, slow, creaking wooden vehicles pulled by oxen. They carried everything they owned and everything they dreamed. Days were long, nights were cold. Food was simple: bread, beans, bacon, and whatever they could hunt. But the dangers were endless. Rivers overflowed, wagon wheels broke, accidents were common. Diseases like cholera spread like shadows. Storms swept across plains with terrifying speed. And yet, they kept going. Why? Because the West promised land, a fresh start, a future. And those dreams were powerful enough to move entire families across the continent. The Oregon Trail became a symbol of America's courage and its cost.
Life in the West was not romantic, not glamorous, not like the movies show. It was hard, raw, unpredictable. The frontier was a place where people had to build everything from nothing. Homes were made from logs, dirt, stone, whatever the land provided. Roofs leaked, winters were brutal, summers were scorching. Water had to be carried, wood had to be chopped, food had to be hunted, gathered, or grown. Frontier life was a daily test of survival. Children worked beside adults. Women held families together. Men hunted, farmed, built fences, protected the land. And at night, when the sun sank behind the mountains, the world became quiet. So quiet that even the sound of a horse far away could be heard clearly. Yet, despite the challenges, people on the frontier found small joys. The smell of bread baking in a clay oven, the warmth of a fire after a freezing day, the laughter of children playing outside a log cabin, the sight of stars filling the night sky, stars brighter than anywhere in the East. Frontier life was simple, but real, hard, but honest, and every sunrise felt like a victory.
In 1848, everything changed. A man named James W. Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill in California. He wasn't looking for treasure, just building a sawmill. But when he picked up those shiny nuggets, he unknowingly lit the fuse of one of the biggest social explosions in American history. Within months, news spread across the nation, then across the world. By 1849, more than 300,000 people rushed to California. They were called the 49ers. They came from everywhere: China, Mexico, South America, Europe, Australia, and every corner of the United States. Some came on horseback, some came by ship, some walked for months to reach the West Coast. They dreamed of striking it rich, finding one gold nugget that could change their lives forever. But the truth was far harsher. Gold was incredibly rare. Competition was fierce. Living conditions were miserable. Disease spread rapidly. Violence was common. Mining camps were muddy, chaotic, overcrowded places. Tents and shacks covered the hills. Prices were outrageous. An egg could cost more than $1. A shovel could cost as much as a week's wages. Gamblers, merchants, thieves, and dreamers all lived side by side. And though some men did become rich, most did not. Still, the gold rush changed America forever. California's population exploded. The West became connected. Railroads expanded. Towns and cities sprang up, and the American economy transformed. The dream of gold brought millions westward, and once they arrived, many stayed. The West would never be the same.
When people think of the Wild West, they think of one image: the cowboy. A lonely rider on horseback, a dusty hat, boots, spurs, a rope slung over the saddle, riding through endless plains beneath a burning sun. But real cowboys were not like the Hollywood version. Most were young men, 17, 18, 20 years old. Many were black, Mexican, or Native American. Many had no family, no land, no future back east. Cowboys lived a tough life. They worked from sunrise to sunset, herding cattle across hundreds of miles. They faced stampedes, storms, hunger, rattlesnakes, and bandits. They slept under the open sky, sometimes in freezing cold, sometimes in deserts with little water. Their food was simple: beans, biscuits, beef, and black coffee. Their pay was low. Their work was dangerous. But their freedom was unmatched. Cowboys created their own culture, their own music, their own slang, their own style of riding, their own unwritten code, and their own legends. The cowboy spirit, independent, brave, loyal, resilient, became a symbol of America itself. But that wasn't the whole story, because soon the cowboy world would collide with something even more powerful: the railroad.
Before railroads, America felt enormous, endless, almost impossible to cross. But when steel rails were laid across the plains, the entire nation changed. In 1862, the U.S. government approved one of the most ambitious projects in human history: the Transcontinental Railroad, a railroad that would connect the East Coast to the West Coast, an iron ribbon stretching nearly 2,000 miles. Two companies built it: the Union Pacific from the east and the Central Pacific from the west. They faced unimaginable challenges: burning deserts, rocky mountains, deep canyons, harsh winters, attacks, accidents, explosions, avalanches. Thousands of workers risked their lives daily. Many were Irish immigrants, many were freed Black Americans, and more than 12,000 workers were Chinese laborers, men who worked the most dangerous jobs for the lowest pay. They used picks, hammers, ropes, and dynamite. They carved tunnels through the Sierra Nevada mountains, sometimes advancing only a few inches per day. But they did not stop. And on May 10, 1869, in a place called Promontory Summit, Utah, the final spike, known as the Golden Spike, was hammered into the ground. The nation was united. East and West were one. Now a journey that once took 6 months by wagon could be made in 6 days by train. Railroads changed everything. Cities grew. Goods moved faster. Mail traveled quickly. Frontier towns expanded. Cowboy cattle drives reduced. And more settlers moved west than ever before. The West was no longer distant, no longer isolated. It was connected. The Iron Horse had conquered the frontier.
When people rushed westward, towns appeared almost overnight. Some grew into cities, others vanished within a few years. But nearly every Wild West town had the same ingredients: a dusty main street, a row of wooden buildings, a blacksmith shop, a general store, a livery stable for horses, and always a saloon. Saloons were the center of Western life. Men gathered to drink whiskey, play cards, gamble, tell stories, and cool down after hot days. Music, laughter, arguments, and danger filled the air. But where there were crowds, there was trouble. Gamblers cheated. Drunk men fought. Outlaws hid among the crowds. And sometimes a disagreement turned deadly. Guns were common, and tempers were short. So Western towns needed protection, and that's where sheriffs and marshals came in. Sheriffs weren't superheroes. They were usually ordinary men trying to keep peace in places where peace didn't come easily. They dealt with fights, robberies, horse thieves, disputes, brawls, and dangerous criminals. Some sheriffs became legends: Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, Wild Bill Hickok. But many others worked in silence, unknown, uncelebrated, risking their lives for little pay. Lawmen had a difficult job. Rules were unclear. People were desperate, and justice was not always perfect. But their presence gave towns one thing every frontier community needed: hope. Because without law, the West would have collapsed into chaos.
Where there were fortunes, there will be thieves. Where there were lonely towns, there will be danger. And where there is freedom, there will be outlaws. The Wild West had many. Some were violent, some were clever, some became legends. Robbing stagecoaches, holding up trains, stealing horses, raiding banks, escaping into the mountains, hiding in deserts, disappearing into forests. One of the most feared names was Jesse James, a former Confederate guerrilla fighter turned notorious bandit. He and his gang robbed banks and trains, moving like shadows across Missouri, Kansas, Texas, and beyond. Then there was Billy the Kid, a young outlaw whose sharp aim and daring escapes made him both feared and admired. Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch robbed trains with military-level planning. And hundreds of lesser-known outlaws wandered the frontier, men who drifted from town to town, living outside the law. But here's the truth. Most outlaws were not heroes. They were desperate men in desperate times. Yet the stories of their escapes, their shootouts, their clever disguises became woven into American folklore. The line between villain and legend blurred. The Wild West was not just a place of heroes, but a place where danger walked freely.
And so, the story didn't end with the fall of an empire. In fact, it was only the beginning. Because every time a kingdom collapses, every time a ruler is overthrown, every time a civilization vanishes into the dust, humanity is left with one burning question. What really happened? History books tell one version, legends tell another. But the ground, the soil beneath our feet, often holds the real truth. Archaeologists in modern-day Turkey discovered something that shocked the world. Layers of ash, broken pottery, collapsed walls, all pointing toward a massive fire. A fire big enough to erase a city. But here's the twist. The city itself didn't match any record from ancient maps. No name, no king, no mention in any known empire. Just ruins. As if someone wanted it erased. And when the carbon dating reports came back, scientists found something terrifying. The city existed during the same era as the rise of the first great superpowers,
Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. If this unknown city was that old and that advanced, why was its history wiped out? Who tried to hide it? And what were they trying to hide? Some theorists believed it was destroyed by war. Some said it was a political cover-up. Others believed it was erased by nature, earthquakes, drought, famine. But one inscription, barely visible on a shattered stone, changed everything. 3 symbols, just 3. But those symbols matched the earliest form of a language believed to be older than Sumerian, older than Egyptian hieroglyphs, maybe even older than civilization itself. A language no one expected to find there. A language that suggested this city might have been the missing link between the first humans who settled and the first humans who ruled. That meant it wasn't just a city. It was a blueprint for civilization. And suddenly, historians around the world found themselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Maybe history didn't begin where we thought it did. Maybe the world's first great civilization wasn't in Mesopotamia. Maybe it was here, buried, forgotten, erased. But why? Because hidden inside that ruined city, inside a sealed underground chamber, untouched for thousands of years, was a tablet. A tablet with inscriptions describing a massive migration. Not one group of people, not one tribe, an entire population leaving the city, leaving everything, voluntarily, as if they knew something was coming, as if they were escaping something they couldn't defeat, something that forced an entire civilization to vanish from history. And that is where the real mystery begins.
They left clues. Not many, not detailed, but enough to suggest one thing. They weren't running from an enemy. They were running from a force. Something bigger, something unstoppable, something that didn't care about kings or kingdoms. And for thousands of years, people assumed that force was nature. A flood? An earthquake? A drought? Reasonable theories, but not enough. Because the inscriptions on the tablet didn't describe panic. They didn't describe chaos. They described preparation. Organized, strategic, calm. It was as if the city planners knew exactly when the disaster would strike, and exactly what they needed to do before it happened. But here's the detail that sent shockwaves across the archaeological world. The tablet also described a return date. Yes, a date. A moment in the future when their descendants would come back, reclaim the city, and rebuild what was lost. But that date wasn't 100 years later, not 200, not even 500. It was almost 4,000 years into the future. A time that matches our era, our century, our generation. So the next question became, why would an ancient civilization plan for a return thousands of years later? What did they know that we don't? Researchers attempted to decode the timeline written on the tablet. At first, they thought those numbers represented the movement of stars. Then, they thought it was the tracking of comets. Later, some believed it was a calendar. But the truth was far more shocking. Those numbers were predictions, not of natural disasters, not of political changes, not of wars, but of cycles. Cycles of rising and falling civilizations.
cycles that matched real historical events with almost terrifying accuracy. The fall of ancient Egypt, the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages, the Industrial Revolution, world wars, technological booms, each rise, each fall. It was all there, written thousands of years ago. And their final prediction, the last cycle, points to a global shift, a dramatic turning point for humanity. Not the end of the world, but the end of an era and the beginning of something entirely new. But here's where the story gets even stranger. Inside the ruins of that forgotten city, archaeologists found no weapons, no signs of warfare, no burned skeletons, no mass graves. And yet the walls were scorched, the ground was cracked, the buildings collapsed from the inside out, as if the destruction didn't come from outside, but from underneath. Something beneath the city, something they built on top of. A source of power? A geological fault? A ritual chamber? Or something far more advanced than we ever imagined they could understand? That is what led historians, scientists, and researchers to a terrifying possibility. What if the first advanced civilization was not destroyed, but simply abandoned, because they realized the world wasn't ready for them? And what if now, in our time, the signs of their return are already beginning?
The more scientists studied the ruins, the clearer one truth became. This city did not die. It paused, as if someone pressed a switch that turned off an entire civilization. Light to darkness, sound to silence, life to stillness. But that switch, whatever it was, left a signature. Heat. Not fire, not lava, not war. A controlled, contained burst of energy so powerful that modern instruments still struggle to measure it. And here is the part that stunned the entire scientific community. The energy signature found beneath the ruins matched something discovered only once before, far away in the deserts of New Mexico. A test blast, a human-made explosion, a moment in history where the world witnessed a power that could reshape landscapes and rewrite destinies. The first nuclear explosion. Except the ancient one was thousands of years older, long before electricity, long before metal tools, long before recorded history. A surge of power so enormous that only one explanation made sense. There had been a technology, a forgotten science, lost but not destroyed, hidden, buried beneath the earth, sealed behind stone, waiting. And suddenly, the writings on the tablet made perfect sense. The return date, the prediction of a new era, the cycles of civilization. They were not warnings. They were instructions. A roadmap. A message left by a civilization for a future humanity capable of understanding their knowledge without destroying itself. And that future is ours. But the most chilling line on the tablet was written in a script so precise, so intentional, it almost felt like a message sent through time. When the world begins to speak in light, we will rise again. For years, nobody understood this. Speak in light. What does that even mean? But then, a researcher connected the dots. Fiber optics, lasers, photonic communication, data traveling at the speed of light. The internet world literally speaks in light. Internet, satellites, smart devices, even the way we communicate right now. The prophecy wasn't poetic, it was literal. And according to the tablet, their awakening is supposed to happen in this century. But here's the real twist. The archaeologists found something else inside a sealed chamber beneath the deepest part of the ruins. Not a weapon, not a machine, not gold, not jewels, but a shape, a human shape. A perfectly preserved silhouette, carbon dated to be older than any known skeleton. A body encased in crystal-like minerals as if frozen in time. Not dead, not alive, suspended, waiting. And the chamber holding that body was connected to conduits, veins of ancient technology leading directly to the energy source buried under the ruined city. A power source designed to activate on a specific date. A date that aligns perfectly with the same timeline written on the tablet. A date not far from now, just a few decades away. And if the calculations are correct, humanity is on the edge of meeting the first ancient human to survive across civilizations. A witness from the world before history. Someone who knew what truly happened and why they left.
For weeks, the scientific team debated their next move. Do they leave the chamber untouched? Do they study it? Do they open it? Every decision carried risk. Because if this truly was a preserved human, someone from a civilization far older and far more advanced than our own, then waking them up could change the course of history. But leaving them there could mean ignoring the biggest discovery since the dawn of time. So they decided to do what humans always do when facing the unknown. They investigated. Slowly, carefully, quietly. They began scanning the crystal shell that held the ancient figure. And what they found sent chills through the entire laboratory. The crystal was not natural. It wasn't ice. It wasn't stone. It wasn't any known mineral. It was engineered. A man-made molecular structure designed to preserve biological tissue for thousands of years without decay. A technology modern science still can't replicate. Inside the crystal, the figure's heart contained microscopic metallic threads. Not wires, not implants, something else. Something like an interface. As if the ancient civilization had merged biology with technology long before modern humans even learned to shape iron. And the strangest thing? The threads were pulsing. Weakly, slowly, but pulsing. A heartbeat. Not dead. Not alive. Dormant. Waiting for activation. Waiting for the return date. Waiting for us. The more they studied the crystal, the more they realized it was not just a container. It was a machine. A machine linked to the underground power source, the same one that caused the ancient energy surge millennia ago. But that power source was running out. Not fast, not dangerously, but enough that the awakening was becoming inevitable. Once the energy hit zero, the crystal would unlock. Not explode, not fail. Unlock. As if this figure was never meant to sleep forever. As if they intended to step into the future, our future, at a very precise moment. But here's what terrified everyone. The countdown was no longer theoretical.
It was active. And according to the final calculations, the awakening would happen within this century, in less than 80 years. A living witness from a forgotten civilization would open their eyes in the modern world. What would they see? What would they think? Would they consider us evolved or primitive? Would they recognize our technology as progress or as danger? Would they come in peace or with warning? Because if their people once controlled a power stronger than anything humanity has ever known, then they understood something we do not. Something important. Something critical. Something the tablet hinted at in its final line. When we return, the world must be ready. Ready for what? For knowledge? For change? For danger? No one knew. But deep beneath that ancient city, in a chamber untouched by time, the fate pulse continued. Steady. Patient. Waiting. A reminder that history is not just a story of the past. Sometimes, history waits for its moment to return. And that moment is coming. The research team, now overwhelmed with the gravity of their discovery, made a unanimous decision. They would hide the chamber from the world. Not destroy it, not seal it forever, just keep it secret. Because releasing this information publicly could trigger chaos, panic, or worse, conflict between nations who would fight to control whatever power this ancient civilization once held. So they removed all digital records, destroyed every backup, and erased every trace of the discovery from the official excavation logs. Only 12 people on Earth knew what they had found. But secrets, especially world-changing ones, never stay hidden forever. Months later, the lead archaeologist, Dr. Elias Warren, began noticing strange things. Unmarked drones hovering over the site, satellite scans directed precisely at the dig zone, foreign research teams showing sudden interest in the surrounding region, people watching him, following him, silent cars parked near his home at night. Someone out there already suspected the truth. But how? Had they intercepted a file? Hacked the system? Or had this discovery been predicted long before the scientists even arrived there? Because one night, Dr. Warren returned to his office and found an envelope on his desk. No name, no stamp, no fingerprints. Inside it was a single sheet of paper. On the paper, written in perfect replica of the ancient script from the tablet they had uncovered, were 4 chilling words. "You are too early." The handwriting matched nothing from the excavation. No researcher, no historian, no translator. It was as if the message was written by someone who already understood the ancient language, fluently, naturally, effortlessly. Someone who had not learned it, but lived it. Dr. Warren's hands trembled. As he compared the symbol strokes, they weren't copied from pictures. They weren't approximations. They were authentic. The message felt like a warning, or a reminder, or perhaps a signal. A signal that the ancient ones were not only asleep beneath the earth, they were awake somewhere else, watching, waiting, guiding. The next day, Dr. Warren attempted to contact the 12 members who knew about the chamber. By noon, 3 of them had vanished. Phones dead, homes empty, cars abandoned. By evening, 4 more were unreachable. Not kidnapped, not harmed, simply gone, as if they had never existed. Only 5 remained. And that night, each of them received the same message, a whispering voice call from an unknown number, speaking in a language that none of them understood, except Dr. Warren. The voice spoke the same ancient dialect they had spent years trying to decode. But he didn't just understand it, he felt it, as if the words were echoing from somewhere deep in his memory, from a place older than his own life. The voice said, "Guard the sleeper. Do not awaken him until the world completes its cycle." And then the line went dead. No static, no click, just silence. A silence too heavy, too deep, too knowing. By now,
Weeks passed. The remaining 5 members of the secret circle lived in constant fear, not of governments, not of discovery, but of the unknown force that was silently shaping their every move. Dr. Elias Warren barely slept. Every night he woke up with the same dream. A corridor made of stone, ancient, cracked, echoing with footsteps not his own. And at the end of that corridor, a door glowing with a soft blue light, always closed, always waiting. But each night, in the dream, he walked closer than before. And every morning, he woke with a sensation he could not explain, as though the dream was not his imagination, but a message being sent from somewhere deep beneath the earth, from the silent figure inside the crystalline shell. Then, on the 41st night, the dream changed. For the first time ever, the door opened. Not with violence, not with force, but with a calm, deliberate motion, as if acknowledging that the time had come for him to see what was inside. In the dream, Dr. Warren stepped through the doorway, and there he saw it. A city. Not ruins, not stones, not decay. A living, breathing city of shimmering light floating in the air as if gravity did not exist. Towering structures shaped like spirals, bridges woven like silk strands, streets glowing with soft radiance. People. Not mythical, not godlike, but unmistakably human, walking with purpose through corridors of pure energy. Then he saw the same symbol etched on the crystal chamber, the same symbol written on the tablet, the same symbol that appeared in the mysterious warning letter. A circle, surrounded by 12 smaller marks, 12 cycles, 12 ages, 12 eras. The center of the circle glowed brighter, 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 until a voice whispered right behind him, "You are almost ready." He turned around, but no one was there. And then he woke up, heart racing, hands shaking, sweat dripping down his forehead. But this time, something was different. Because when he looked down at his hands, he saw a faint imprint, lines glowing beneath his skin in the shape of that same ancient symbol. The mark faded within seconds, but it was enough. It meant the dream was not a dream. It was contact. The ancient civilization was reaching out to him, not randomly, not accidentally, but intentionally. Because they had chosen him, Dr. Elias Warren, to be the first modern human to understand their return. The next day, Dr. Warren made a decision that would change everything. He knew he couldn't run, he couldn't hide, he couldn't bury the truth. So he traveled back to the excavation site, alone.
No guards, no scientists, no witnesses. He descended into the chamber beneath the ruined city. There, in the cold glow of the ancient machinery, the crystal sarcophagus stood exactly as before. But something was different. The pulse inside the figure was stronger, clearer, almost rhythmic. The awakening was accelerating. He approached the crystal and pressed his hand against its surface. For the first time, the crystal responded. Light spread beneath his palm like ripples on water. It scanned him, recognized him, accepted him. And then from deep within the crystal, a voice echoed into his mind. Guardian. One word, one title, one destiny. Dr. Warren reeled back, his mind spinning. Guardian? Guardian of what? Of humanity? Of the ancient sleeper? Of the coming cycle? Then the voice spoke again, so clear it felt like it echoed through his bones. Prepare them. And just as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. The chamber fell silent, motionless, still. But the message remained. The ancient civilization had chosen its messenger, and the countdown was no longer a secret. The world had less than 80 years before the sleeper awakened. The question now was not, will he wake? The question was, are we ready for him?
One truth became impossible to ignore. The ancient civilization had not disappeared. They had evolved, transforming themselves beyond time, beyond borders, beyond history, watching us, testing us, preparing us for the moment their greatest survivor would rise again. The question now wasn't, who were they? The question was, what happens when he wakes up? Because the countdown was still ticking, slowly, steadily, and nothing on earth could stop it.
For days after the encounter in the chamber, Dr. Elias Warren felt different. Not physically, though he often sensed a strange warmth in the palm that touched the crystal. The difference was deeper, mental, instinctive, as though an ancient echo had awakened inside him. He became aware of patterns in history, in human behavior, in world events, patterns he had never noticed before. Cycles, the same rise and fall repeating across civilizations. Now he understood why the ancient tablet spoke of 12 cycles. Because humanity was moving toward the final one, the 12th, the last turning. And the sleeper below the ruins was connected to that turning in a way the world had never imagined. Dr. Warren tried to warn the remaining members of the secret circle, but none of them responded. Their silence was not fear. It was disappearance. One by one, their homes were emptied, their digital footprints erased, their identities wiped clean, as if someone or something was removing everyone connected to the discovery. Yet Dr. Warren remained untouched, unwatched, unharmed, protected, because he had been chosen. But why him? For weeks, this question consumed him. He was a scholar, not a leader, a researcher, not a revolutionary. What could he possibly offer to a civilization that mastered energy, biology, and time itself? He finally found the answer in the most unexpected place. One night, while examining the photographs of the tablet inscriptions, Dr. Warren noticed something strange. The tablet was incomplete. Not broken, not damaged, just missing pieces. deliberately removed, edges filed smooth, corners carved with precision, as if someone had taken certain fragments thousands of years ago and hidden them somewhere else. Why hide parts of the message from their own people? Unless those missing pieces were meant for a different audience, not the ancient civilization, not their descendants, but for the future, for us, for him. The next morning, he returned to the chamber determined to understand the connection. As he approached the sarcophagus, the light within pulsed again, brighter this time, as if responding to his presence. Then he heard it, not in his ears, but deep in the back of his mind. A whisper, a memory, a voice older than history whispering, "You carry what they lost." He staggered back, breath shaking. "Carry? What?" he whispered aloud. Again the voice answered, "The missing stone, the final piece." He froze. The missing tablet fragments, the pieces cut away thousands of years ago, were not hidden in the ground. They were hidden in memory, in lineage, in blood. The realization hit him like a wave. The ancient civilization did not vanish. They became the ancestors of a small, scattered bloodline. A bloodline that carried knowledge hidden in genetic memory. A bloodline that would one day give birth to the guardian. To him. It explained everything. Why he understood the dream language. Why the crystal responded to his touch. Why the ancient voice reached only him. Why the chosen 12 were removed, all except him. He wasn't chosen at random. He was born for this. A descendant of the forgotten people. A living bridge between the first civilization and the last. His role was not to awaken the sleeper. His role was to prepare the world. But prepare it for what? For enlightenment? For knowledge? For reunion? Or for a warning that humanity was repeating the same mistakes that once destroyed the world before? As Dr. Warren stood in the chamber, the light from the crystal illuminating his face, the voice spoke one final message. "The cycle ends soon. You must begin." He felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. It was time. Time to reveal the truth. Carefully, quietly, strategically. Not to governments, not to corporations, not to those who would weaponize it, but to the world, to the people. Because when the sleeper finally awakens, when the last cycle reaches its turning, humanity will need a guide, a voice, a guardian. And Dr. Elias Warren accepted the role he was born to play. The countdown continued. The pulse grew stronger. And somewhere, deep beneath the ruins, the sleeper stirred.
Dr. Elias Warren left the ruins that night with a mission he could no longer ignore. But the world he stepped back into was already changing. Subtly, quietly, almost invisibly. Yet he noticed everything. The strange atmospheric disturbances over major cities, sudden magnetic shifts detected by satellites, unexplained drops in radio frequencies, lights in the sky that governments called weather balloons, but pilots described as impossible. The patterns, the cycles, were beginning to align. Just as the ancient tablet predicted. Humanity was entering its final turning, and the sleeper below the earth was not the only one awakening. Something else was rising.
something woven into the fabric of history, from the fall of empires to the birth of nations. A force humanity had felt before, but never truly recognized. A force the ancient civilization feared and tried to warn us about. But their warning had been scattered into fragments of stone, lost languages, forgotten myths, and bloodlines hidden across continents. Dr. Warren realized that the knowledge he carried was not his alone. He needed allies. But not scientists, not politicians, not military leaders. He needed people untouched by greed, people who listened, people who questioned, people who saw the world differently. So he began searching. His first destination was a small mountain village in Peru. Not because of ancient ruins, not because of legends, but because months earlier, a young girl there had drawn a symbol during a school art exercise, the same ancient symbol from the chamber. She had never seen it, never been taught it. She simply felt it. A genetic echo, a sign. When Dr. Warren met her, she stared at him silently, as if recognizing a face she had seen in a dream. "You're late," she said softly. The same words from his dream corridor. A chill ran through him. "Who told you that?" he asked, voice trembling. She pointed to the sky and simply said, "They're coming back." Dr. Warren didn't stay long. He didn't want to endanger her. But before he left, the girl handed him a small carved stone she claimed to have dug out of a dream. When Warren turned it over, his heart stopped. It was a fragment of the missing tablet piece. The same shape, the same markings, and the same smooth-cut edges from the ancient ruins. But the stone was warm, alive, waiting. He placed it in his bag and began his next journey. Because the girl was not the only one. Over the next months, Warren found others. A monk in Bhutan who sketched the spiral cities from Warren's dreams. A blind musician in Turkey who hummed melodies matching the frequencies of the crystal chamber. A linguist in Iceland who spoke fragments of the ancient language in her sleep without knowing why. All of them carried pieces, genetic echoes of the forgotten civilization. All of them felt something coming. All of them felt the turning. And every one of them, regardless of culture or language, spoke the same phrase. The sleeper must not awaken alone. The meaning was clear. When the ancient being emerged from the crystal chamber, he would need not just one guardian, but many. A circle, a new 12, a modern version of the ancient council that once guided the world through the last cycle. Dr. Warren was forming that circle now, piece by piece, person by person, drawn together by forces older than history. But time was running out, because the crystal's pulse was growing stronger each month, and on the final night,
of the winter solstice, as Dr. Warren stood alone in his dim office, the pulse suddenly surged, so violently that the sensors across the world triggered emergency alerts. Earthquakes, auroras, magnetic storms, systems crashing. The countdown had entered its final stage. The sleeper was stirring again. And this time, he was dreaming too.
And so the mystery deepens. The following spring, 1588, Sir Walter Raleigh attempted once again to send supplies to the struggling Roanoke settlers. But the winds of war were blowing across the Atlantic. England was preparing to face the powerful Spanish Armada, and nearly every ship was seized for national defense. Roanoke, that tiny settlement on the edge of a wild continent, was left to fend for itself. Month after month passed, then a year, then two. Families who had sailed with dreams of building a new life were left completely alone, surrounded by thick forests, unfamiliar climates, and tribes whose relationships were still fragile. What happened inside those lost 2 years remains one of America's greatest unanswered questions. Finally, in 1590, 3 full years after the settlers were last seen, the rescue mission arrived. The sailors stepped on to the sandy shore. They called out. No one answered. There were no voices, no laughter, no movement. The entire colony had vanished. But the rescuers weren't met with silence alone. They discovered a clue, the word Croatoan carved deeply into a wooden post. No signs of violence, no signs of a hurried escape. Everything was simply gone. Theories exploded. Did the settlers peacefully join the Croatoan tribe? Were they killed by hostile groups? Did famine force them to leave the island entirely? Or, as some modern researchers believe, did they split into multiple groups, attempting different paths for survival? But the most chilling part? Not a single Englishman from that settlement was ever found again. The forests remained quiet. The cabins rotted away. Nature slowly reclaimed everything, as if the colony had never existed. Yet the word Croatoan survived, a carved whisper from 400 years ago. Some say the settlers successfully integrated into native communities, their descendants hidden within tribal histories. Some claim a devastating storm forced them to abandon the island entirely. Others believe a mysterious illness wiped them out before help arrived. But perhaps the truth is a combination of all these theories, because history, like the people who lived it, is rarely simple. Even now, with modern archaeological tools, satellite imaging, and DNA analysis, the full answer remains out of reach. The lost colony refuses to be fully found. It is a reminder that the earliest American settlers were not just explorers. They were people fighting for survival in an unfamiliar world, far from home, with nothing but hope, courage, and fragile dreams. And somewhere on the shores of North Carolina, a quiet spirit still lingers, a colony that walked into history and dissolved into legend.